Okay, so now we're going to do an install of a mighty mount. We're going to put it right here just behind the seat on this Tarpon 120, and we're going to install it with the FullBack vacuum plate. So one thing I've done here before I got started is I took a really close look at this boat. I looked inside the hatch as well as I could. I took a flashlight and a mirror. You just shine the light into the mirror and kind of rotate the mirror around, and it'll kind of show you things inside the boat so you can see what geometry on the inside you're dealing with. It's really important that you know what you're dealing with inside the boat. You know, this rigging bullet is a great tool. It's going to enable you to do things that you couldn't do otherwise, but it's a rigging bullet. It's not a magic bullet. This is still kayak rigging. I like to say kayak rigging has the word rigging built right in. You need to approach this that way. If you're not comfortable with rigging kayaks and drilling holes and doing these kinds of things, if you don't have plenty of things laying around the shop there to deal with in your garage to make a hook or to get a light down in there so you can see, this might not be the best thing for you to do. But if you're comfortable with rigging a kayak, this is definitely going to empower you to do some things you couldn't do before. The way this process is going to work is we're going to cut us some pieces of string. We're going to thread them through the rigging bullet. We're going to tie a knot on the back side so that it can't pull back through. Then we're going to drop those rigging bullets down into the hull. We're going to snake them up to our hatch, which is just in front of the seat, using a stick with a hook on it. We're going to pull them back to that point, and we're going to attach that to the backing plate. We're going to pull the strings. That's going to bring our backing plate up into place. Then we're going to put in the fasteners. We're going to remove the rigging bullets and then put in fasteners in those holes, and we'll be done. So the only thing we're not going to do here is drill the holes. I've already done that. And in case anybody isn't already aware of this, when you drill holes for any mount on a kayak, what I always recommend is you want to put your mount in place, drill your first hole, go ahead and drop that first fastener. This is going to prevent that mount from sliding around while you're drilling the second hole. Using the mount as the guide, and with the mighty mount, you're going to use a 1/4-inch drill bit. Go ahead and drill your second hole, drop that fastener in. Again, you want to have the fastener in before you move on to the next hole. That's going to make your hole pattern a lot more accurate. Drill the third hole, drop that fastener in. Finally, drill the fourth hole and drop that fastener in. Once you've done that, then you can kind of take everything back out. If you want to give yourself a little more wiggle room, you can drill the hole slightly oversized. I prefer to have as small of an opening as possible. If you did go oversized with the holes, it's going to make the install easier, but you may want to consider using some sealant or something around there. You may want to do that anyway, but if you look at the backing plate here, you've got a nice flat surface here. When this is tightened up, that's going to tighten up against the hull, which is really going to kind of seal that opening. And then on the back side, you see we have nylon locking nuts, and those nylons are going to interact with the threads, which is also going to help seal the opening. So quite frankly, you're going to get a lot more water through just things that are already attached to the boat from the factory than you are through this mount if you install it correctly. What I don't recommend is ever installing any kind of a mount below the water line, because even a very small amount of water coming in can turn into a real problem. So let's get started here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut some string that's long enough to snake our rigging bullet from the mount location back to the hatch. What we've picked up here, we went down to a department store, we picked up some No. 3 yarn. This isn't the fluffy kind of yarn that you might see a blanket or something made from. This is actually a really, it looks more like kite string. So you want to make sure you get the right stuff. But basically what we're looking for is something with a small enough diameter that it'll go through the hole in the rigging bullet, but a large enough diameter that once we tie a knot in the other side, it won't pull back through. The other thing we're looking for is a really limber texture. We don't want something with a lot of memory. We have used monofilament, heavy monofilament for this process. It doesn't work very well because it has too much memory. It almost acts like a little coil spring, and it really prevents that rigging bullet from sliding freely. And what I do is about 2.5 to 3 times the length of what it takes to get from the mount to the hatch. We're going to go ahead and cut this string. We're going to thread the string into the nose end of the rigging bullet. Then we're going to go ahead and tie us a nice big knot. You want to make sure this knot is large enough that it can't pull back through the hole. So I just kind of, a few overhand knots you know, make a really nice big interference. And then we're going to trim off the excess. The other thing I like to do is I'm going to go ahead and drop a 1/4 20 nut over this string, and you'll see why I do that in a minute. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take another 1/4 20 nut and tie it to the end of the string. And the reason I do this is because I don't want this end of the string to get away from me later on and actually accidentally get pulled into the hull. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start the install. We're going to take our rigging bullet and our mighty mount, and we're going to start the rigging bullet into the first hole in the mighty mount, and then we're going to drop it right through the corresponding hole in the kayak. The rigging bullet's just going to lay on the bottom of the hole, and I'm just going to go ahead and drop in some extra string. I'm going to feed enough string in that I know that this is going to make it all the way to the hatch when I go to snake this thing in. Okay, so what I've done here is I've just taken a stick that I had here in the shop, a little piece of tube, and I've just taped a paper clip to the end of it, and that's going to be the hook that I use to pull this rigging bullet into place. Okay, so I'm just going to reach inside the hole. I'm going to go past this thing. Looks like I got it on the first try that time. Sometimes this is easy, sometimes it's not. This is definitely the most challenging part of the install, but in this case, real smooth. Got to hook up on the first try. Okay, so the way we got that rigging bolt into place is we snaked it in with a tube with a hook on it. The other way you can do this, especially helpful if you have more than one person, is drop the rigging bullet in, feed in some extra string, and lift the stern of the boat or the bow if your hatch is in the back, and let that rigging bullet just slide right down the hole to the hatch. That's actually a lot easier if you have a really long distance to cover than trying to reach back there and snake it in. And because most of these boats are really slick on the inside, if you turn the boat on its side, let it go right down the side of the gunnel, it's usually a straight shot to the hatch. One thing we want to do is we want to use 2 rigging bullets, because if we use one and we pull this backing plate into place, you can imagine this backing plate could be oriented anywhere in the horizontal plane. So we want to make sure that we can get the fastener started. So what we're going to do is we're going to put one rigging bullet in one corner, we're going to put the other one in the other corner. So since we're going to do 2 of them, the last thing we want is for the strings to get tangled on the inside of the kayak. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take this bullet and kind of pull all the slack out of the string. I'm going to let it hang straight down. I've already got the 1/4 20 nut on the other end here that gives it a little bit of weight. It's hanging straight down. You can also tie these together in the middle. There's a number of ways to accomplish this, but the point is we want to have that string up, out of the way inside the boat so it doesn't interfere with our second one. And we're going to take this rigging bullet and we're going to drop it into the hole that's diagonal to the one that we've already got started. Alright, and now we've got the second rigging bullet back to the hatch. I'm just going to tug on this string, and I've got this one here, so I know that I need to start it in the corresponding hole in the backing plate. If it lines up sitting on top of it, it's going to line up when you drop it inside. Just make sure that you've got the flat side up. Now I know the other rigging bullet's going to go in the opposite corner, diagonally, so I'm going to get it started. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to take these 2 strings and we're going to pull this backing plate right into place, and there you see it coming into view. Now the first thing I'm going to do, even without looking into the access hole, you can feel when this thing picks up off the bottom, and I want to hold it off the bottom for a few seconds before I pull it all the way up, and that's in case there's any twist in the string. It'll just kind of sit there and untwist. So now I'm just going to pull this thing all the way up. I'm going to look over the top so I can kind of guide the bullet into the holes in the boat. And then I'm just going to kind of tug on the string. Now, the string we've selected here, it's not the strongest string in the world, so you do want to be, you know, somewhat careful about how hard you pull on it. But if everything's lined up well, you're not going to really need to go overboard. So you'll probably remember when we started this first rigging bullet, we dropped a 1/4 20 nut on the string. And now you're going to see why that is. We could have done this with both strings, but it's really not necessary. But what we're going to do is we're going to pull this backing plate up tight. And we're just going to run this first nut down. That's going to kind of hold that backing plate in place so we can start the other fasteners. Now, if you've ever discussed kayak rigging with me, or if you've ever seen any of my videos, you know that I strongly recommend using anti-seize. And we're going to start our first screw. Again, a little anti-seize. We'll start our second screw. Okay, so now we have those first two screws started. We don't need the rigging bullet anymore. It's done its job. One thing I will point out is that there may be times when that rigging bullet is kind of wedged in place. And a good method in that case for getting it out would be to clip the string. Just get that out of your way. Take this first nut that you put on, get it off the mount a little bit, get it close to the top, and then put a second nut on. And this will act like a jam nut. Take a wrench on each nut and tighten them real tight together. This is going to lock this assembly, and it's essentially going to give you a bolt head that you can then put a wrench on and actually use it to turn the rigging bullet out. Okay, so now we're going to put in our third screw and fourth screw. And I'm just going to take my little hex key here. I want to get all four snug so that I know that backing plate is inside the hole, nice and flat. You know, we don't want to tighten one up and cause the backing plate, one side of it, to come up a lot first and then get in a bind. Now we're going to use the long arm of our hex key. And I'm just going to kind of push this thing around until I feel that real tension. I know at that point that all of the plastic of the backing plate is against the inside of the hole. The mighty mount is down on the top of the hole, and it's all sandwiched together. I know I've got a good, nice, tight bond there. And then I'm going to go about a quarter of a turn. Again, I felt that tension there. About a quarter of a turn. Do that for all four fasteners. Now you don't want to over tighten this. There's no need to. We've got locking nuts on there. These things are not going to vibrate loose. You're dealing with plastic, so you can actually compress the plastic. It'll essentially never tighten up like steel to steel would unless you start deforming the mount and deforming the boat and everything. So once you feel it really snug up, a quarter turn's all you need. Okay, so now we've got a good shot here of the backing plate installed. It's the FullBack backing plate pulled into place with the rigging bullet. So once again, it's a nice, secure install, good quality install. This is as secure as it gets. And you know, we put this in a place where previously your only option would have been rivets. We've got a really secure install, as good as you could possibly ask for, and we're ready to put anything we want on this mighty mount. I mean, we can use this as an attachment point for trolling rods. We could use this as an attachment point if we have one on either side. I wouldn't hesitate to put outriggers or something like that to this. Obviously, it's not something you would do if this was installed with rivets. So we've got that done. One thing I do want to point out, in this case we used the FullBack for remote install with the rigging bullet. The FullBack is really affordable. It's probably costs about the same as a couple of packs of hardware down at your local home improvement store for stainless steel hardware. So it's actually really good option even if you can reach the inside. Instead of holding a ratchet inside and trying to hold a wrench on top, you put that backing plate in place, you start your fasteners, and then you just come over to the top side and tighten it all up. You don't have to reach inside and hold anything. It's going to give you the most secure install that I know of for a mighty mount, and it's just going to be something that's, you know, it's long lasting, it's permanent, it's not going to ever pull out or anything like that. So consider not only for this remote application, but also for areas where you can reach from the hatch. It's going to make your install a lot more secure and a lot easier.